Hello and welcome to the Intentional Brief, your weekly video update on the one big thing in cybersecurity news for growth stage companies, their investors, and management teams. I'm your host, Shay Colson, managing partner at Intentional Cybersecurity, and you can find us online at intentionalcyber.com. Today is Monday, August 5th, 2024, and we're back from a couple of weeks of travel on the road with clients. And now that the dust has kind of settled around the great CrowdStrike event of 2024, I think it's worth taking a step back and looking at some of the larger lessons that are available to us coming out of this incident. So I want to talk a little bit about what TPRM, or third-party risk management, in a post-CrowdStrike world means. It seems like Delta Airlines and CrowdStrike are looking to kind of settle their score around this event in public, with both attorneys and CEOs making statements in papers and websites left and right. I keep seeing more and more articles about it, and I'm not going to settle that score here, but it is interesting to see that conversation in light of the ongoing investigation that the Department of Transportation is making and some of the statements that Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg made today. I've linked to that article down below. But what's really interesting here to me is the friction between the issue and the impact. That's really the core of what third-party risk management is. It seems like it's about third parties and the issues that they have, like CrowdStrike's update, but it's actually about the impact to your own business and understanding your ability to operate in a contingency situation and have planned for that, which clearly Delta failed to sufficiently do and now are trying to recoup damages through other means. But that's the lesson that we can really learn. Right? The key to building a good third-party risk management program, which is so often overlooked, is that it has to start with a fundamental understanding of how those third parties support your business processes, your operations from a holistic perspective. In this case, encompassing, not only confidentiality and integrity, but here, of course, availability. So confidentiality is, can you keep the data safe? Integrity is, can you keep the data trustworthy? And then availability is, can you get the data when you need it? It's this last pillar of the triad, availability, that's so often overlooked. And I think we spend a lot of time worrying about things like data loss, right, from the confidentiality perspective, especially in the ransomware context, because that's what attackers are doing. They're leveraging essentially regulatory frameworks against their victims. Remember, the original ransomware attack was an availability attack. Maybe you could call it an integrity attack, but really what they would do is they wouldn't steal the data. They would just lock up the machines and then ask for a ransom to unlock it or decrypt it. But it turns out that between backups and the fact that encrypted data on your local machines isn't a reportable breach, that meant that the sense of urgency to pay just wasn't there for the victims. And so as a result, attackers have adapted and have started exfiltrating the data, right? Stealing it first and then encrypting or deleting it afterwards. Because while you can have backups that will keep you operational, if data is now exfiltrated, that becomes a reportable breach. And that's really where the leverage is, both from a reputational perspective and in these other ways. And that's also where defenders' attention naturally has drifted. And so in some ways, I'm glad to see that this availability pillar is going to be getting some more attention following the CrowdStrike incident. You know, I've worked with a lot of clients around the NIST cybersecurity framework and implementing it at their organizations. And I've always found that this area was glossed over, right? Things like true contingency planning, understanding your supply chain, and then how you fit into the supply chain of others, ensuring that your third parties are appropriately incorporated into response and recovery planning. It's not like these ideas are new. They've been here for quite a long time, but there were often other higher priority items that needed to be addressed. Now, however, I think we're going to see these areas get more and more attention, and rightfully so. So as you look to address these issues in your own organizations, I would offer the following pieces of general advice. Number one, first things first, the process for building third-party risk management has to start with an understanding of your business and then the impacts that a third-party issue might have on your business if they have a confidentiality, integrity, or availability event. The second piece is bite-sized chunks. Use criticality, the likelihood times the impact, as a way to gauge who your critical third parties are for this exercise, and start small. You aren't going to be able to do all your vendors. Do the ones that matter most and do them first. The third piece of advice is reasonable requests. You can add contractual obligations all day long, but the truth is that most vendors will sign whatever they need to in order to close a deal. You can do audits too, right? But what of your findings? Are you going to drive remediation in their organization? Are you going to project manage it? Are you going to pay for it? Are you going to run that tool? unlikely. So instead, focus on things that are reasonable for your vendors, including notification periods if an incident does occur, and then follow the rest of the risk management on your side. That needs to be building resilient processes, sourcing alternative vendors, or ensuring that a critical process is one that utilizes multiple vendors so that you can avoid that single point of failure risk. I know that it can be difficult and frustrating to try to manage the interests of your vendors, partners, and suppliers alongside your own cybersecurity goals and requirements, but I would suggest to you that instead focus on the risks, their impact to your organization, and then managing those risks down to a level that's acceptable to the business. Ultimately, this isn't a decision that's going to be made from the security side of the house. In fact, you're not likely to make any decisions. Rather, you're going to present the options, help weigh and interpret the risk and implications, and then put whatever decision does get made into play, one at a time, based on that criticality. From a fundraising perspective, another relatively light week with only $7.8 billion in newly committed capital, following another light week last week, $1 billion light from there at $6.8 billion. I would call this probably a typical summer slowdown, perhaps a summer slump, and I'd expect to see this trend of lighter weeks continue for the rest of the month through Labor Day here in the US. Things are cyclical and summer is slow. That's okay. I wouldn't read too much into it. The Financial Times did note this weekend that the big players in the space, Ares, Apollo, Blackstone, and KKR, are poised to deploy about $160 billion to increase buyout-linked investments. So they seem to think that deals will continue to flow or start to flow more frequently or at larger scale here soon. We'll see if the rest of the market follows that trend. You can find all the links to the articles we covered in the comment section below. You can find back issues of these videos and written transcripts at intentionalcyber.com. And we will see you next week for another edition of the Intentional Brief.